All right, so we're going to start out. We're going to start out with with one of these bases, and so a couple little teeny tips that you should do, and I'm going to show you how to check a couple things. Um, two things you should never do. Uh, Never assume that you have a factory edge, and also never. And factory edge means that like I didn't cut it. So most of the boards that you guys have are pieces that were really large that I cut down so that I could fit them in the box and make them more workable. I wanted them the right size to fit on your drafting board so that you guys could kind of utilize this to help you lay out. So the first thing is never assume that you have a factory edge, an uncut edge. Also, never assume that that factory edge is square. So you guys have your triangles, and so we'll be utilizing these. And what we want to do is we want to really kind of, I use two fingers. Actually, I use three fingers. What I do is I kind of put my finger on, sorry, I'm off the camera. I kind of put my finger on the edge of the board, and then I put two fingers on the bottom. And what you basically do is over in this corner, or in any corner, you kind of put like the bottom, make sure that the bottom's lined up, and make sure that the sides lined up. It's really hard to do when you're not laying it flat. But if you guys can kind of see what I'm doing there, let me see if I can move this over just a little bit. So I'm kind of using like my fingers to pinch the corner, and then I'm using this finger to kind of make sure it's lined up to the bottom. And I know it's really hard for you guys to see, but there's a little teeny gap. I don't know if you guys can read that right there. But if I take my pencil and slide it down the edge of this board, you'll see here it gets caught on the edge of my triangle that's sticking out, right? So what I know is that this corner is less than 90 degrees, right? So this board's more of a hopefully it's a parallelogram. It doesn't matter what it is. It's not square, right? So what I can do is I can kind of work my way around the board and see if I have a corner that's square. So now that I'm looking this corner over here, I'm doing the same thing. I'm using a finger to pinch this. I'm using the finger to pinch this, and I'm verifying that this corner over here is actually square. So this is a good corner. So I can actually flip this over. And I'll just double check it again. Hopefully you guys can again see this. And you can see here, this is a nice straight line. This is a nice straight line. It fits perfectly on my square. So I know that this corner is square. So what we're going to do is I'm going to measure out because if I look back at yesterday's cut sheet, one of the things that I had yesterday was I had my base, and my base was 10 inches by 10 inches. So real quickly, we're gonna actually measure out our base, and then we're gonna cut our base. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually intentionally make a couple scraps, and so that we can practice around gluing. So what I'm gonna do is, does anybody want to take a stab at how we would measure out 10 by 10? Anybody want to tell me what their process would be? How would you make sure that you have nice parallel edges? And go back to what we've done in the past. Somebody tell me what to do with the ruler here. And be nice. Anybody? Edge to edge. So come down here. And so let me ask, if I put a mark at 10 inches, I'm going to put a little mark at 10 inches. What do I do from this step? So I like what you're thinking with the cross. But do I just take this 10 inches and kind of put my ruler on here and, find some arbitrary spot just to kind of draw? Because it was 10 inches down here. It's got to be 10 by 10. What might I do somewhere else? All right. So I'm going to pick some arbitrary spot within the length of the ruler. I'm going to pick some spot over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of randomly pick this spot. What you do want to do is try to make sure that your ruler is as perpendicular to this edge as possible. So the way that I do it is I kind of use my 0 mark here, but also I use the whatever the bottom mark is on the other side, and I make sure that they're both on the edge. And normally that tells me that my ruler's very, very perpendicular. If I want, I could always grab my triangle and line it up with the edge, and you can see I'm a little bit off, but it's not going to make a huge difference. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make sure I have my 0 on over here, and I'm going to go ahead and mark it. Oh, I'm sliding all around. Mark it, put it at 0, mark at 10. Okay, so just remember this rule: 2 measurements for every line. If you can remember that, it'll make it really easy to create perpendicular or parallel lines, right? So 1 measurement off of here to 10, 1 measurement off of here to 10, and then now what I got, I know you guys can't see it, but I actually have a mark right there in that bullet, and I have a mark right here inside of that bullet, okay? So what I'm going to do is, just like I do with the drafting tool, I put my pencil on the mark, I butt my ruler into it, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my pencil tip as like a pivot point. That's the fulcrum of the lever. Okay, so I've got my line here, and I'm going to draw my nice 10 inches. I can use my ruler here, and I can verify I've got 10 inches. And if I just simply slide this, you can see that I'm holding that 10 inches the entire length. All right, so measurement off, mark. Measurement off, mark. Connect the 2 dots. That's going to give me a nice parallel to this edge 10-inch mark. My next mark that I'm going to do, and actually I'll pause right there for 30 seconds and let you guys, if you're participating on the spot, I'll let you guys take your 2 measurements. So Danny, what I did was I made sure that I had a square corner, right? So I used my triangle. I verified that I got a nice square corner. Once I verified that this and this is so if you remember back to regular old geometry class, this is a 90-degree angle, right? So this is a right triangle in the corner. What I'm going to do from that point is I'm just going to kind of pick an arbitrary spot. I use the edge just because the edge is nice and straight. So what I did was I came down here, I put the 0 from the ruler on this left edge, and then I put a mark at my 10-inch mark. So I actually looked on my ruler, found my 10-inch mark, and then put a little mark at my 10-inch mark. And then what I did was I slid my ruler up. Again, I put my 0 on, and I put another mark at 10 inches over here. And that left me with a little mark and a little mark. And quite simply, I just used my ruler, and I connected that dot to that dot, or that mark to that mark, and then I just struck a nice straight vertical line. Now, again, just the reminder, okay? 2 measurements, connect the dots. If you do that, if you do measurement from here, and draw it, I'm going to have parallel lines. These 2 lines right here are going to be parallel to each other. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically do the same thing. I'm going to come off of this. I need to come 10 inches up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ruler, put my 0 down on the bottom edge. Okay, I'm going to utilize my other line. And what I'm looking at here, just so you guys know, I tend to not use a tool to do my measurements, but I can visually, and I hope you guys can visually see this, but this gap is growing, right? So I don't have this ruler at the right angle. What I want to do is I want to, kind of make sure that I'm holding it parallel to this other line, right? So that looks like the gap is a lot more consistent all the way up. If you look at like the gap here versus the gap up here, they're very consistent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my ruler back at 0. I'm going to put a mark at 10 inches. And then I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to slide this thing over. And I'm going to look at the edge of the piece of cardboard. I've got my 0 marked. I'm making sure that my gap is nice and parallel. And then I'm going to put a mark at 10 again. Okay? And I don't know if you guys can see those on screen. I hope you can, but there's a mark right there. And there's a mark right there. And quite simply, I'm just going to take my ruler. Again, I always take my pencil tip, put it on my mark, slide the ruler into it, and then I utilize my pencil tip as the fulcrum point of the lever. And then I'm going to line it up with that. Good. Make sure my ruler gets nice and held down, and of course I slid it. Why not? Why wouldn't I have slid the ruler? All right, let's try that again. Okay, so it's a little fuzzy over here, but you can see I'm going to cut my bottom line. All right, so I'm just going to verify I got that 10 inches. So I'm going to take a measurement down here, measure up 10 inches. That looks good. Measure up 10 inches, and that looks good. I don't have a ruler long enough to do this, and I don't think you guys do. I think the only one that has it, Alana, gonna show off the ruler. She's got the big long metal ruler. Yep, perfect. So Alana actually has an advantage because what she should do, and this is what I would do if we were in class, because normally we have those big metal rulers. I would tell you to measure from corner to corner and measure from corner to corner. And if those two numbers are really, really close or the same, then you know you have a perfect square. We're going to make the assumption that I did a perfect square because I should have parallel lines, right? Because I measured over 10, connected the dots, measured up 10, connected the dots. That should give me a nice perfect square. So I've got my beautiful left-handed scissors, and for those of you who don't believe me, if you look at this little cut right here, see how the thumb just like perfectly goes into that cut? Marina, did you get yours yet? Yeah, life-changing? I mean, help me out. It did you make your parents use them? Yeah, you should. Totally switch them with the scissors he uses. All right, guys. So I'm gonna go ahead and make my cut. I'm gonna do my best to cut this really, really nice. Of course, I'm used to using X-Acto knives and box cutters and things like that, but we're all gonna suffer through this together and use scissors. So I'm just gonna kind of take my time here. This material should cut pretty good with scissors. It's a little thick, but just work your way through it. Take your time. And then, of course, bend these things up when you need them. Okay. Um, Guys, you might have to go ask moms if they have any, if you want to use them. Ladies, you probably have them, and I don't know what they're called. But there's like cardboard little sticks. They look like popsicle sticks, but they got sandpaper. You use them for your nails. I think they're called like something like e- it's something like that. Like I think my mom when I was a kid used to call them like emery boards or something like that. Is that nail file? Okay. It normally looks like a popsicle stick, right? So if one thing they're really convenient to have when you're doing architectural modeling, because what you can actually do is if you end up with like a little spot where you're not real happy with it, it might be a little fuzzy, you can use one of those fine nail files and hit up the edge, and you end up with a really nice little edge that you can work with. Okay, so that's my base. That's the example on how to cut the base. Um, what you should be left over with is a scrap like this. So what I want you guys to do is, well, I'm going to let you guys work in the background, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take my ruler and I'm just going to draw a couple lines. And I want to do, I think 3 lines. So I'm going to do one across. I want one a little bit taller to make a little bit of a taller wall. And then I'm going to make one narrow one. And this doesn't have to be perfect. You can see I didn't even measure. So, about, if you want to use scale, I don't know. Let me see. About I don't know, 2.25-ish, right? About, it doesn't matter. About 3, about 1. That's not bad. That's perfectly 1. All right, so about 1 and whatever you have left over. Okay, so I'm just going to put these up here. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you guys see it, right? About 2, about 3, about 1. If I could write, your what does? Okay, that's correct. Yep. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these, and I'm trying to be very straight on my on these cuts. Try to be as straight as you can. We're using scissors, so like this is not going to be as good as it could be, but, or I should say, most of us are using scissors. Yeah, I mean, I don't, the, I'm going to take a sip of coffee and continue working here. You're good. You're good. I'm just not going to address it. You're good. All right, so I'm going to continue cutting my little lines here with my beautiful scissors, and I'm going to get this thing done. So I've just got a few scraps, okay, guys? So, um, there we go. So I've got my 3 scraps, and then my scrap base. We're actually going to practice doing some gluing here. And so we're going to have a little contest here. So I see Alana's there. I got some cameras on, so I'm going to utilize those folks that have their cameras on. I don't know who that is in the upper. I don't know who that is where I can see the drafting board. I think it might be Dave. I think. Oh, no, that's Nick. All right, so that's Nick. So I got Nick. All right, so Marina, are you cutting as well? Okay, and I know Alana's going. It doesn't matter. These are just scraps. I just have mine about 3, about 2.25, about 1, and then just some sort of leftover. It doesn't really make that big of a difference. I just have scraps, but we're gonna do a little gluing exercise. So I want to get the three of you that no, no. I I would prefer you not being on the drafting board, but I also don't want you guys to destroy anybody's table. Like I don't want you to be on your dining room table. That's perfect. Yeah. Yeah. I don't even want you guys on the drafting boards, but I'd rather off you ruining my board than your antique dining room table and then me having to address those answers and questions. All right. So we are going to, in a second, we are going to practice together how to apply glue to the edge. And what all we're going to do is we're going to take these scraps and we're basically just going to glue them to this other scrap base. And we're going to want to try to get those as vertical as we can and get them to stick as nicely as we can and stand up. And so Alana, you've built some models before. How fun is this part? How fun is this part, right? You go like that and it goes like that, right? It goes like this, it goes like this. And then you sit there and you hold it, right? And you just hold it and then you let go and it normally doesn't fall. So what we're going to do is we're going to adjust it. Yeah, you got to kind of, yeah, bend it in place. Yeah, yeah, that's always fun. So, all right. So a couple things. The first thing I'd like to see is once you guys have these four scraps, I'd like everybody to kind of practice this. And so I don't have any white glue. My white glue was dried up, so I'm actually going to utilize some of this wood glue. And I'm going to find a scrap piece of paper. And I'm actually going to work on my scrap. And so we're going to have a little friendly competition here and see how good we can do gluing these things and see how long they take. All right. Here we go. So let's start with the shortest. Let's start with the shortest one. Um, so I've got this one here. I'm going to glue this thing on here, and I just want it to go vertical. I'm actually going to hold it pretty close to the right edge so that I can squeeze in my second one, and then I can squeeze in my third one. So, few tips. The first thing I'd like to see is let's go. Alana, can you? I don't know if you're able to. Can you tilt your camera down just a little bit so we can see your work? Because I'd love to if you're able to. If not, it's okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. No, that's okay. That's okay. And I'm gonna ask Marina to do the same thing if she's able to. If not, it's totally cool. If not, it's gonna be. It it doesn't really matter. I just made them all like the same. You know, that was all out of one strip, and I just kind of went about that wide, about that wide, about that wide. How's this for size? Short, medium, tall, right? Or narrow, a little wider, and wide. It really doesn't make a difference. I just wanted you to have whatever. That's okay. This is just practice for gluing. So, what we're gonna do is we're gonna give this a shot. What we're basically our goal is to glue these things and get them standing vertical, okay, or as vertical onto this piece of cardboard as possible. Um, so I'd love to see, since you guys have all taken some sort of class before where they showed you how to glue something. So I'd love to see like how you guys would approach this. So I'm going to let you guys do this first with the short one. And I want everybody that's not got their cameras on participate in the fact of trying to watch and see what these guys do because we'd love to see how they apply their glue because this is going to be interesting. So I'll go ahead and let Nick. Are you good with this? You're going to participate and you're good. Thumbs up is good. Awesome. All right. So yes, white glue is the best. I don't have any, so I'm using wood glue. Mine's not going to be as good, but it will work. Um, so I see Nick. He's doing the old hold the bottle right on the edge and walk it down as slight as possible. Anybody else in the class? Would you guys do it that way? And I like that he's smoothing it out, making it a little thinner. No, Dave says no. Danny says yeah. Mahar says yep. Let's see here. Alana, what did they teach you? How did they teach you how to do this? That's okay. They didn't get into model like teaching you how to model well. All right, Nick. I'll tell you, I'm like baffled that you got that to go on that thin. That's awesome. Great job. Start with the shortest, and then let's work our way up. Okay. So right. So let me ask you a question. If you look at that real closely, can you see a lot of like flooded glue, a lot of like overage in glue, or does it look to be pretty clean? Sure. It's not like flooded with glue, right? So one thing that I want to tell you guys is a lot of times what happens, especially with the method that Nick used, right? And Nick, that's fine. I appreciate you doing that, right? Because Nick did this and kind of like really finely kind of walked the tightrope, if you guys can all picture, right? And then I actually saw Nick do something pretty cool. He like kind of pushed the finger up and smoothed out the glue to make sure that he had glue along the entire edge. And then he kind of just plopped it down and it was in pretty good shape, right? And I see Alana was sort of kind of doing the same thing. Perfect. All right. You guys want to see you guys actually did really good with that, right? So the taller you get, right? When we get to this one, that one's got a lot more weight at the top, and this one's more likely and more prone to falling over. And being that we're working with such fine edge chipboard, this stuff kind of doesn't want to stand as well as the other stuff. So let's go through this. Does everybody have a scrap piece of paper that they can use? If you do, have a scrap piece of paper because I'm going to show you guys a really cool little modeling trick that you'll appreciate. Yes. You're doing it the right way. Glue your piece. And I'm actually going to show you guys all a good little tip here. So I'm going to let Marina finish up hers. And I think she did kind of the same thing. She sort of walked the tightrope with the glue. I think Marina's on her second one already. All right, Marina, hold up on that. Here's what I'm going to suggest you guys do. Take your glue, take a scrap piece of paper. And what I do is I always draw a line with my glue longer than any. I drew an exceptional amount. Um, I drew a line of my glue and I tried to keep it as straight as I could. And I tried to make it just a little bit longer than the pieces that I'm working with. Does that make sense? And so, Alana, I don't know why they didn't teach you this at UMD. They should have, right? Because now instead of me trying to take my glue bottle and walk the tightrope, right, which is what you guys are doing, and I'm older than you, so my hands aren't as steady. You guys are trying to do this and get a very little bit. If I put a little dab of glue on my paper and just take my part and literally just slide it until I get the ever so slight little glue line. So so quite simply, if you guys can look at this, and what I do is I normally just brush off a little bit. I literally have the finest little bit. You guys probably can't even see it, but there's literally the finest little bit of glue on the edge of that chipboard, okay? And what happens with this is when it comes to glue, the rule that I want you guys to remember is less is more. And so literally, as soon as I set it down, in fact, like you shouldn't be able to move it very much once you set it down. So again, rinse, wash, and repeat this. I'm just going to kind of slide this into my glue, just get a little teeny edge. And again, you don't see me walking the tightrope. I'm just kind of dipping it in. And if you guys can see that, it's all the way across. It's a very, very fine little bit. Take this one, should be able to stick it. And what I do is I typically just sort of take it and slide it a little bit to the left and the right. And by the time I do that and let go, it's normally adhered. And then I'm going to take my last one. I'm just sliding it through the glue just to get a nice little consistent line. Dabbing it off. And again, you guys really shouldn't even be able to see that. Actually, you can see how thin it is. I got strings flying off of it from the glue because the glue's stringy. And then this is the tall one. This is the hard one. This one should be the one that falls because of the weight. So this one might take just a little couple seconds to hold. And there we go. That tall one's glued in. And just like that, you should be able to glue your pieces on. So this is a neat little trick because again, you're not trying to, what I said, walk the tightrope in a sense. The other thing that it allows you to do is it allows you to close your glue up. The tips on these things get really nasty really quick. But if you're able to kind of dip in, and Alana, be honest, was that a little easier than what you did last year and holding it for 4 or 5 minutes? Yeah, and if you look at it, you virtually should see no glue, right? If you look at your glue edges, if you see glue, you use too much, to be completely honest with you. And so that's kind of the rule when it comes to gluing. This right here, this is a great trick. You end up I ended up wasting a lot of glue because I'm using a big fat wide tip on the wood glue has like a really wide tip. So normally if you're using Elmer's glue, you can just do like a nice straight little line. I've actually gotten to the point when I glue my line, I actually use a straight edge. I grab like another scrap and I glue along the edge of a straight edge. So it just helps me. But what's nice is that this is all you got. You trash this, you're good to go. And what's really neat is that these things should be so dry within seconds. I mean, I'm not even a minute in, and this thing should be pretty good. Now, this is really thin chipboard. So if you look at that and compare that to the size of just even my finger, that chipboard is really thin. And being that it's holding, it's holding pretty good. These things shouldn't really fall apart. You just want to be a little cautious with them because it is such thin chipboard. That's really kind of like the model building quick tips. Normally we have knives and things like that we're going to tend to. We obviously aren't going to use those right now. We're going to use this. All you really have to do at this point is you guys are making your base, which you have, right? So we already cut the 10-inch by 10-inch base. We then take and start cutting out whatever shapes we have. So if we had a triangle, we would cut our triangles. Same thing's going to apply if I was making my little squares, right? So let's just say, I'm going to peel this off real quick. But let's just say we were making, I'm going to cut this edge and get me a nice clean edge. I'm not measuring. Yes, ma'am. So you're not. You're gonna represent it with just the thickness of a wall. Yep. Yep. So if I'm making my squares, I'm going to do the same sort of thing, right? So I'm going to take this, and essentially what I'm going to do is I'm just going to glue these edges together. And now this is bent, of course. So I'm going to do my best to glue this as a box. Okay. And I'm going to take my next piece. What I like to do when I'm doing these sort of boxes is I like to glue together two 90s. And then what I typically do is I'll take this 90, dip it in, get a little glue edge, do the same thing on the other side, dip it in, get a little glue edge, and then I take these two 90s. And I didn't measure these, so these aren't going to be good 90s, but you'll get the idea. Okay, so there's my box. I have my tube. Again, I didn't measure it. I just kind of cut pieces. It's not really a box, but then what I do to glue this one to the base, again, just sort of the same procedure, right? I'm going to dip this edge in, get a little bit on that edge, flip it over, dip a little bit, get that, fold it over again, get that side, and then obviously the last side. I've got all four sides, and then bloop, I'm going to put it onto my base, and I should be dry enough already to start handling this, okay? So that's virtually what you guys should be working on. Spend a little more time in the craft. I didn't measure anything on that. Obviously, I just kind of demoed how to make a quick little box. You're going to be doing the same. This is the open box. This is one of the quote unquote open boxes. If it's a closed box, you're basically just going to cut a lid that's going to fit on top of this. What I would suggest is that if you're making a closed box, because you guys are going to have a hard time, I'm going to try to peel this off. You guys are going to have a hard time making these perfectly square. Do your best. They don't have to be perfect. But what I would do is I would take my box before I glue it. I would line it up on a piece of chipboard. I would take my pencil with a very, very sharp point, and then I would trace the box, and then I would cut right, literally like right inside of your line. Okay, and then reapply a little bit of glue. And I'm just going to lay this down, and I'm going to try to trap it. Let me see. I don't know which way I had it rotated, but there we go. I got a lid on the box, right? So it's not perfect, but you guys get the idea. I got mine rotated again, but this is close enough. And then, of course, I just kind of dab these edges back in, get a little glue on the bottom side. Yes, sir. So I was just demoing real quick how to make the box. You guys, if you are comfortable, um, I would say at this point you guys have your base. The next step for the base is going to be to actually draw your grid on the base. Okay, so I wouldn't even use the drafting tools. I would just use my ruler if I was you guys. What I would simply do is just ruler along the edge, and I'd put a mark at 1 inch, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'd come to the top, ruler along the edge. I'm going to flip mine over, ruler along the edge. And I'm going to put a mark at every 1 inch mark again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then quite simply, I'd put my pencil on that mark, pencil on this mark, and draw my border really, really lightly. I'm drawing mine dark. You guys are drawing yours light. And then once I have my vertical border, of course you want your desk cleaned off more than mine. Once you have your vertical border, come to this edge. Don't get glue on the floor. Come to this edge. Down towards the bottom. Mark every half inch. 1 inch, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. And then come to the top, mark it half, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, right? Keep going. And then line up your ruler, take your strike. Line up your ruler, take your strike. And just keep going. And then you'd have your grid on your object. And then when you go to place, I already glued it down. When you go to place these objects, they just go on grid. All right. And so another thing that you guys are calling them nail files. If you have a spot to where like that's keeping you from being able to make this thing vertical. Another tip that you can do, if you have regular old sandpaper, you can lay a sheet of sandpaper down on a flat table, and you can hold this as vertical as you can, and you can basically just sand the bottom just a little bit to make it to where it stands perfectly vertical. Mine looks like the Leaning Tower of Pisa because I didn't care about measuring, but you guys are going to spend a little more time kind of trying to make that work. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording there. I think that's plenty.